Hi everyone, welcome and thanks so much for checking out my channel. My name is Tanny and I am an independent author and somebody who really just loves a good story. So on this channel I talk about writing, stories I've enjoyed, and lessons I've learned on my publishing journey. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I am also a mental health therapist, so today I want to talk about something that's really important to me and something that I think all writers can benefit from, and that is self-care for writers. I just want to share some practical tips for taking care of your mental and emotional health so that you can keep writing and not get burnt out. So first of all, why is self-care important for writers? It's really hard to be creative and feel completely immersed in a story if you're stressed out and struggling. Self-care has been shown to reduce stress and can even boost your self-esteem. And I think that part about self-esteem is really important too, because creative writing is so personal. And sometimes when we're really vulnerable and sharing that personal part of ourselves, it can put a lot of stress and really impact our self-esteem. We might start to judge ourselves and our value based on the things that we're creating and the stories that we're writing. And often those judgments are not positive. By making yourself a priority with self-care, you're showing yourself that you matter, regardless of what your writing is like or where you're at or what you're struggling with creatively. Self-care helps you to stay physical, mentally, and emotionally healthy, and those areas are all things that we need if we want to be functioning at our best as writers and just as people. So here are my 10 tips to help you practice good self-care. Number 1, your physical needs are important. You guys have probably seen that pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we have the physical needs on the bottom and then other needs kind of going up from there in order of what's most important. And there's a reason that those physical needs like food, sleep, shelter are all at the bottom of the pyramid. It's really hard to function if we're not taking care of those really basic needs first. And so it's important for you to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, that you're eating well, that you're taking care of your physical health and any issues you might have with that. Some of the ways that you can incorporate this into your writing routine would include going for a walk after half an hour of writing or after you hit a certain word count goal. You could also set a timer for 20 minutes to write and then get up and stretch before starting a new writing session. Make sure that you're staying hydrated, that you're drinking enough water throughout the day. Sometimes when I'm in the zone when I'm writing and I'm just really focused on what I'm working on, I don't remember to drink enough water and then I feel really dehydrated by the end of the day. Or I'll be writing really late at night and I don't even realize what time it is, which means then I'm going to bed super late and have a hard time the next day. But those physical needs are really important, so you just want to make sure that you are taking care of those the best that you can. Number 2, set good boundaries when you're receiving or looking at feedback. For this, I'm mostly talking about beta reader or critique partner feedback, where you send your writing out to somebody and ask them for constructive criticism. That feedback can be really helpful and really useful, but it can also be really hard as writers to hear some of that feedback when this is something that's so personal to us and we've poured our hearts and souls into this story, and then to have somebody come back with things that need improvement, even if it's done in a kind way, that can still be really hurtful to hear those things if you're not in the right mindset. This can also apply to reviews and just to comments on social media. Before you look at any feedback, you need to ask yourself if you're in a good place to be able to hear constructive criticism. And if you're not, then maybe you just need to set it aside for a little while. The feedback will still be there when you're ready to hear it. This gets especially tricky with reviews, and I think that's an area that we've seen in social media several times over the last few weeks of authors responding to reviews that they perceive to be negative. So it's important to remember that reviews are for readers, and if you do choose to look at your reviews, focus on the more positive ones. I don't think it benefits anybody to be reading 1 and 2-star reviews of their book. If that's something that you feel like you can handle, that's fine. But rather than responding publicly to them, I think it's a good idea to maybe just share those with a trusted friend or someone that you can vent to, so that you don't say or do things that you might regret later or that other people might feel badly towards you about. Before you look at any kind of feedback, it's also important to remind yourself that this is feedback about your story. And while your story is very personal to you, the reason that you looked for that feedback, I'm assuming, is probably because you want to get better and you want to improve. So don't take it personally. It's not about you as a person. It's about the story, and it's just a way to help you improve. You may get some beta reader comments or some feedback that does feel more personal and it doesn't seem to be very helpful. That happens sometimes. And if that's the case, then maybe it's time to look at cutting ties with that particular critique partner or beta reader. You just really want to make sure that you're setting good boundaries with feedback, because that can be really damaging to your self-esteem if you're not in the right headspace to be looking at feedback and then you see or hear something that's really upsetting to you. Number 3, stop comparing yourself to other writers. Look, I know this one is easier said than done, and it's something that I struggle with a lot, but everyone's writing journey is different and other writers are not your competition. I know it's really hard to avoid this one completely, so if you really have to compare yourself to other writers, I think it's important to do that in a way that's logical and rational, because it's really easy to just spiral off into all these negative thoughts that really don't have much bearing when you think about it. You have to remember that you're writing your own story and your journey is not going to look the same as anybody else's. It's also important to make sure that you're not comparing your first draft to something that's already published and on your bookshelf. That book on your shelf has gone through multiple revisions. Several different people have looked at it. It's probably been changed and hacked to pieces and torn apart and put back together more times than you can imagine. And so to compare your first draft, or really any draft that isn't a completely polished and finished version of your story, to something that's already been published, that's just not rational, and it's not fair to do that to yourself. It's also important to remember that your writing ability will improve over time. And it's okay if you don't know everything right now. None of us do. We're all learning and growing. We all have our strengths and our shortcomings, and we're just trying to figure it out. There's a really good Neil Gaiman quote that I like to remind myself of when I'm struggling with this. The one thing that you have that nobody else has is you. Your voice, your mind, your story, your vision. So write and draw and build and play and dance and live as only you can. And I have always felt like that's really true and something that's really important to remember. We all have our own voice and our own unique way to tell a story. And even if you're writing something that's similar to somebody else, the way that you tell it is going to be different and unique. So don't compare yourself to other writers. Just focus on you and trying to improve yourself. Tip number 4, get a positivity pass. I've seen these positivity passes going around a lot on Twitter and on other social media platforms, and it's basically where you give your manuscript or a portion of your manuscript to somebody and they will only point out positive things about it. While I do think it's important to seek constructive criticism as well and to incorporate that feedback into your writing so that you can improve, it's really helpful to know the things that you're already doing well. And that can be a really good boost to your self-esteem and really motivating for you to continue writing. Tip number 5, take time to refill your creative well. It's hard to write if you're not feeling inspired, and inspiration really can be found everywhere. It's just that sometimes you have to go out and look for it. So what inspires you? Is it being out in nature, listening to music, reading a good book, researching historical time periods, playing video games, brainstorming with a writer friend, or maybe doing some other hobby? Whatever it is, I think it can be really valuable sometimes to just take a step back from writing and take that time to refill your creative well and get inspired by other things. Number 6, create a positivity folder. This is where you create a folder on your computer, but I suppose it could be like an actual physical folder as well. But the idea is that you want to put things inside that are really positive and encouraging to you and motivating. This could be positive comments that you've received or feedback from beta readers and critique partners that highlighted things that you did well in a story. It could be feedback from a positivity pass like I talked about earlier. Maybe it's fan art that somebody has drawn of some of your characters. Maybe it's a positive review if you are someone who chooses to look at your reviews. You just want to gather all of that stuff up and save it in one place so that you can look at it the next time that you're feeling down or discouraged about your writing. Hopefully it'll give you a good boost and remind you that writing is still worthwhile. Even if you feel like all the words coming out of your brain are trash, that's probably not true. Number 7, make a list of all the reasons why you love writing or why you love the book that you're working on. Sometimes when we've been writing for a while or when we've been working on the same project for a long time, it starts to feel really difficult and we might wonder what we're even doing, if this is worthwhile, if anybody's even going to want to read this when we're done, if it's any good, and that can be really discouraging and really self-defeating. In those moments, it's hard to remember why we're even doing this writing thing. It's hard to remember why we love this story in the first place. And so when you are feeling in a good mood and feeling good about your writing and about your story, sit down and take a few minutes to jot down a list of all the reasons why you love writing or the reasons why you love whatever project it is that you're working on. That way you can have something to just pull out really easily when you're struggling, and hopefully it will be a good reminder to you so that you can keep writing. Tip number 8, be mindful of when you need to take a break. We all need a break sometimes, and it's really important to just check in with yourself periodically and monitor where your stress levels are at. And if you do feel like you need a break, take it. It's okay. Sometimes we get this idea that if we're not being productive and we're not doing anything, then we're just wasting time. And that kind of mindset isn't really conducive to the creativity that you're going to need for writing. It's okay to take a break sometimes, and you just need to be aware of what your own limits are and when you reach them, so you can maybe set the story aside for a little while or do something else that you enjoy. It's also important to set realistic goals and deadlines for yourself instead of just rushing to get the book done as fast as possible. When you are setting deadlines, you might give yourself a few extra days or weeks or months, depending on what you're working on, in order to allow time for yourself to take a break or to deal with other situations that may arise outside of your control. Taking a break will help you to avoid getting burnt out so that you can continue to work on your story and be productive over the long term. Tip number 9, make other writer friends. Friends can be a really great support system, and other writers will have a better understanding of the unique challenges of being a writer and can help you figure out how to navigate those challenges. During those inevitable times when you feel like your writing is garbage, a good writer friend will be there to cheer you on. In order to make good writer friends, it helps if you can be a good writer friend to others as well and be a good support to them and offer encouragement. Social media is a really great place to connect with other writers and to make friends, so I would encourage you to look there if you haven't already. Tip number 10, experiment and try different things. The self-care tips that work for one person might not work for another, so it really is kind of a matter of trial and error and figuring out what works best for you. A lot of the tips on this list were very specific to writers, but there are other things that you can do to practice self-care as well. There are a lot of ideas online, and I would encourage you to look those things up if you're struggling for ideas or aren't sure what will work best for you. If you're not already practicing self-care, it can be really hard to know where to start, but just start somewhere. Pick 1 or 2 small things, figure out if they work for you or not, and then kind of go from there. You might have to try a lot of different things, but that's okay. Maybe just pick one small thing that you can do today, whether that's taking a walk or listening to music or making sure that you go to bed 15 minutes earlier. So those are some of my self-care tips for writers. I hope that it was helpful to you and that you were able to take something away from that. If you have other ideas or things that have worked especially well for you, I would love for you to drop a comment below and let me know what those things are. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps my channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see other videos like this in the future. Please go have a really good rest of your day. Do something kind for yourself, and I will see you next time. Bye.